Hello, I'm Daniel and welcome to my YouTube channel. We here at the channel are continuing in our series of videos with respect to information, education, inspiration, guidance, advice, and following on the heels of the last video with respect to benching, the Birchat Hamazon, the grace after meals. I'm reminded of a very touching story. It was related by Rav Silberstein. And it doesn't directly talk about grace after meals per se, benching, Birchat Hamazon per se, but you'll hear this story. A young man in Jerusalem went to a Jewish library in search of a certain volume, not accessible in local shuls. And knowing that this library was not necessarily located in a place with kosher restaurants, he brought a lunch with him. And as a sandwich, and after a period of time reviewing various books, he decides to wash his hands and have lunch. He was off in a corner of the library, ate his meal, and then he began to bench Birchat Hamazon with great kavana, with great feeling. He finished benching, and the librarian, young lady, comes over and says, "May I speak with you?" And she remarked that she heard him bench, not only heard him bench, but listened to him. And it brought a question in her mind. She says, the way that I grew up, with my version of the benching, we implored Hashem in benching, Shelo nevosh, v'lo nekalim, v'lo nekashel. It says that we not feel inner shame, not be humiliated, and not stumble or falter. And she says, I don't understand why the words v'lo nekashel, stumble, it doesn't seem to fit in. Do you know why? I mean, and I've found since then, since I was a little girl, hardly any versions of the blessings, the grace after meals, Birchat Hamazon, include these words. Especially v'lo nekashel, don't stumble. And she says, I grew up observant, but I'm now no longer observant. But when you were benching, it reminded me of this question. So the young man, who'd been used to benching all his life, since he was a little kid, he was stymied for an answer. He was stuck. And he began to search for different versions of the Birchat Hamazon, the different versions of benching. But he was unable to find a version that had these words, v'lo nekashel, don't stumble. And he was looking everywhere, libraries, in his yeshiva, in his kollel, and in the shul, couldn't find anything. He was at home, I think it was maybe his parents' house, and he found an old Passover Haggadah from way, way back then. And it included the words, Shelo nevosh, v'lo nekalim, v'lo nekashel. And what he does is he makes a photocopy, and he circles in red, v'lo nekashel, do not stumble. Goes to the library, drops it off on her desk, and basically forgets about the incident. About a year after the episode in the library, this young yeshiva guy, actually kollel, he was married. He received an invitation to a wedding. And he stared at the names, and he was completely at a loss. He didn't recognize the chussan. He didn't understand. He didn't recognize the husband. He didn't understand. He didn't recognize the kala. Doesn't recognize the family names. He was completely at a loss. And he had figured that, okay, someone gave me the invitation by mistake. It happened by chance. That on the day of the wedding, he went to the street where the wedding was taking place. His curiosity was aroused, and he figured, he just wasn't intending to attend the wedding. He just wanted to see, who it was that was getting married. Maybe he can figure out why he was invited. He goes into the hall, the wedding hall, looks at the people gathered, recognizes no one. A room full of strangers. He's there with his wife. And he says, yeah, it was a mistake, He's about to leave. He tells his wife, who happened to be with him that day, it was a mistake. Just as he was turning to leave, someone comes over to him and asks him his name. And he says, please come with me. The Kala, the bride, would like to speak with you. Now he's really flummoxed. He goes there, and there's this beautiful young lady, all dressed up in a bridal gown and everything. And in Jewish weddings, it is a very auspicious occasion for a bride to give a bracha, a blessing to people. And there was a lineup of people waiting to get a bracha from the bride. The person who saw this young kollel student brings him right to the head of the line, butts of the line, plops him in front of standing in front of the bride. And she looks at him and she says, do you recognize me? I was the librarian who questioned you with regard to that version of Birchat Hamazon, the grace after meals, the benching. And suddenly she became very emotional. She said, I want you to know that in truth, you are the biggest mechutin, the biggest relative at this wedding. If it wasn't for you, there'd be no wedding. It was indirectly because of you that I was inspired to turn my life around to Torah and observance. You see, this girl, at the time of the incident with the lunch and the benching and the question, she was seeing this non-Jewish guy. And he was pressuring her to get married. And he was not only not Jewish, he was completely secular. He wanted her to abandon Judaism completely. And he says, and he finally gave her an ultimatum. He says, listen, if you're not going to abandon being Jewish, if you're not going to marry me, that's it, I don't want to see you anymore. Forget it. And she was basically going to say, yes, okay, I'll abandon Yiddishkeit, and yeah, I'll go, I'll marry you. And after a while of vacillating back and forth, she arrives at the library, a nervous wreck. She was about to renounce her religion, the religion of her parents, the religion of the people, a religion that people had literally died for. But she was in love, so love conquers all. She goes into the library, goes into her desk, and her letter, the kollel student's letter is there, and circled in red, do not stumble. And she says, it hit me. She says, I began to berate myself, the bride said. How could you stumble like this? How could you throw away everything? I was ruining my life. I called off the engagement immediately, and gradually I became a Baalei Tshuva. And afterwards, I was blessed to meet a nice Jewish guy. And thank you, she says to the kollel student. Thank you for benching that day with such kavana, with such feeling that I was moved enough to approach you about that unusual wording, that nusach of benching, that curious wording in the Birchat Hamazon. She says, thank you. We never know the ripples that what we do will have on others, like a stone thrown into a pond. This tiny little thing, the ripples will go all the way to the edge. And you don't know when you say something, the effect that it could have on someone. You should always be mindful. I'm sure the kollel student, when he was eating a sandwich, the last thing on his mind was the librarian. And I'm sure the librarian, the last thing was in her mind was some guy in the corner having a sandwich. But it led to a chain of events that altered her life, literally altered her life. Bear that in mind. We're going to be doing more videos along this line. Please come back, please watch, please learn. And until next time, I'm Daniel, and thank you too much.